Of all the things to get a PlayStation 2 adaptation, it's probably not a surprise that one of the most popular Japanese films, The Seven Samurai, got one. The more out there aspect about this adaptation is the fact that they decided to make it a futuristic diesel punk apocalypse with cyborgs and demons. At one point I considered covering all of the weird adaptations that The Seven Samurai has gotten over the years, and maybe I will eventually get around to doing that. But for now, we're just going to take a look at one of the last games put out by Sammy Studios before they merged with Sega in October of 2004. This game's aesthetics are so cool. I remember first seeing this game in one of Giant Bomb's game tapes videos from the E3 it was revealed at. As soon as I saw that trailer, I had to know what it was. Part of this game, when in the cities, reminds me of both Final Fantasy VII and the original Blade Runner, with its metallic industrial skyscrapers draped with neon lights. Other segments feel reminiscent of late 90s and early 2000s anime, like the works of Yasuhiro Naito's Trigun and Gungrave. The standout part of this game's aesthetics are the character designs, which were done by French artist Mobius, who also did the art for the Panzer Dragoon games, so it shouldn't be a surprise at all that this game is filled with so many striking characters both in the main cast and the enemies you fight along the way. This is the grungy anime shit like early Guilty Gear that I love. There are these cool werewolf enemies, so many different robots, with this one reminding me of Big O. One of the main villains looks like if Yujiro ate Bob Sap after being dipped in Tostitos steroids dip. Like every time you beat this guy, he then subsequently rematches you after injecting even more steroids to get even huger, to the point that at the end of the game, the guy looks like he's in the final minutes of Akira. It's easily the most exciting aspect of this game, seeing what weirdos pop out of the floorboards to attack you. There are a plethora of optional boss battles, and most of them look like they walked right off the set of a Saints Row 2 trailer, like this dude with an afro in a green suit who keeps saying hey 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 over and over again like he's Bill Cosby. Or this puppet-holding weirdo who looks like Jigen from Lupin the Third if he was sponsored by the blue raspberry cherry flavored Airhead. Or these twins who make it feel like you walked right into a completely different game, as if they were drag and dropped right from Jet Set Radio as they do a freestyle rap as their introduction before you beat their ass.
The betrayer, now he makes 6. And wouldn't you know it, the final number 7, Peanut is not here, the child of heaven. So hurry the hell up, cause we gotta go before the damn humanoids try to steal the show. So why are they all tripping about this girl?
The game aesthetically also reminds me of Xenosaga and Phantasy Star Universe with its character models and color choices. I was getting some major nostalgic flashbacks thinking about all the time I spent playing through the free areas of Phantasy Star Universe's demo on the Xbox 360 when I was in middle school. I have so many fond memories of laughing at the 4th or 5th floor, I can't really remember, which was completely overrun by bots and scammers. You'd walk there and you would see nothing but a barrage of messages being sent over and over again asking about doing Microsoft point trades. I hope no one ever actually fell for the Microsoft points for Megan Fox's nudes, but judging by some of the other kids I knew who played at the time, someone probably did. The cathedral in Chapter 7 feels reminiscent of the final level of Gungrave, and like Gungrave and a few of the other games I've covered before this, 7 Samurai 20XX is another one of those read the manual type games, because in the game itself, it does not explain anything for gameplay. It has a digital manual accessible from the main menu, which is what I think you really should read before hitting new game, otherwise you won't know any of its systems or how they work. There aren't any active tutorials, which I think probably should have been there. To compare this game's combat to any of the previously covered action games, its closest analog is probably Space Sheriff Spirits. It's incredibly shallow, with basic combat being done with one sword that is super slow and limp. It does marginally improve in game feel once you activate your Devil Trigger, which allows you to dual wield. When I first experienced this, I couldn't help but wonder why this wasn't how the game always felt, because it's so much more fun to play as, you are so much faster, the game feels way more responsive in this mode. You simply get to let loose when dual wielding. The combat would also feel much better with the inclusion of a lock-on. Yeah, it's one of those janky PS2 action games, akin to Nano Breaker, where you find yourself awkwardly swinging at the air because you have no way to track enemies around you, and enemies love to circle around you as if you're in the center of a mosh pit. Even in dual wield mode, there is still a noticeable amount of stiffness and input eating or input delay for actions. The lack of a lock-on and this stiffness make direct directional moves awkward to do since you don't have any way to anchor which direction you are facing, like a lock-on in other games would. So you'll often find yourself turning towards the camera when trying to do a backwards forward motion. The game also weirdly doesn't interact with the right analog stick at all. Instead, the camera just follows behind the player and pans when it thinks it needs to. You can mitigate some of the potentially bad camera angles, similar to the previously covered Altered Beast, by holding down the left trigger, which locks the camera behind where the main character is facing. After playing so many games lately with really bad camera and really bad camera speeds, it has made this feature really grow on me and makes me wish that it was something that was still an option in modern games today. The same way that I wish more games had sprint on a bumper or a trigger, freeing up one of the face buttons and making it so you don't have to constantly click in the left or right stick, which I absolutely detest. I am positive that this is accelerating controller drift. The other thing that adds to the clunkiness of gameplay is how much slowdown is present. Now, since I play all of these games on an actual PlayStation 2 instead of emulating them, this may be something you can avoid on the PCSX too, but there is a possibility that this is just something that is wrong with the game engine and it will be there regardless. Or there might be other issues with the game that are only present in emulation, like so many games unfortunately suffer from. But regardless of if that's the case or not, if too many enemies get on screen or if there are too many particle effects like when you have a high combo number and enemies are exploding and you're landing parries over and over again, the game drops to what feels like 30% of its normal speed. It's similar to the early Fatal Frame games where it doesn't get choppy frame rates, it simply just slows down. It runs a lot slower. It feels like you're trapped in bullet time. These explosions also make it really hard to see incoming attacks because you are being blinded by rainbow lens flares. Thankfully, the parry is probably the most forgiving that I have ever encountered, as you just press the triangle button and you don't even have an animation, you just have to vaguely hit it in the window and you'll automatically do it. It's not spammable, mind you, since it is tied to a meter, but regardless of this fact, it feels fairly rewarding to pull off since the sound it makes is so satisfying. And the fact that a perfect parry, or a just guard as it's referred to in-game, fully refills your devil trigger. So because of this, it allows you to pretty much stay in dual wield mode the entire time in any enemy encounter as long as you are landing them. The only times I was falling out of devil trigger were when I was fighting enemies that were too slow to actually attack. Some of these crash dummy looking robots just seem to move in slow motion, so I cut them to bits and make them explode before they even have a chance to hit me. This facet of the devil trigger and parry system does in turn make bosses, at least most of them, a complete joke. Boss fights is probably the most unique aspect of the combat system. When you encounter a boss outside of the tutorial one that is the Big O robot that you start to encounter later as a basic enemy, the game turns into a 2.5D Tekken style fighting game. Since they have swords, I guess a more accurate comparison is Soul Calibur, but you get my point. I haven't mentioned it up until now, but this game is very easy, and the fact that your parry window is so lax while giving you such an incredible reward for doing it, you are able to melt 95% of the bosses in this game. This also results in most of the bosses feeling very samey, with only a few standing out because either they had a strong enough shield, which is this red bar below the yellow one, which is their health, so I couldn't just unga bunga their health bar to death, or they had a gimmick of varying annoyance which makes them hard to hit, like the flying boss Cvit or the shadow boss Raksh Lambda. It's probably better off being like this in all honesty, because the combat does not have enough depth or variety to really make gimmick fights or unique mechanics shine. Cvit's boss fight really shows how bad a mold breaking fight can be in this game. You just can't fucking hit her most of the time. The rather basic, shallow gameplay, along with the poor performance at times, does make some of the enemy gauntlets near the end of the game feel like a real slog. They just go on forever as they keep throwing more and more mindless mooks at you to get cut down, while the game speed is caught in the crossfire as collateral damage. If you die in any of these sequences, it sadly means a decent amount of lost progression and time, since there is no way to save in the middle of a chapter. Chapters are also decently long, so it makes it pretty annoying to try and find places to stop in this game. Unless you want to lose progress, you're going to have to play to the end of a chapter, which you never know how long you're going to be from that or where that even is. I wouldn't call this game open world, but it does drop you into some decently sized areas, which usually don't have anything to do in them unless you run into one of the optional bosses or are in one of the story sequences where you have to fight from one point of town to the other in a Yakuza-styled long battle. How are you going to put in a legally distinct 7-Eleven and not allow me to go in there to fuck around. The gameplay isn't the only aspect of the game that they just drop you on your head with and don't explain anything. The game has little to no setup for its world, story, or really what's going on. If this was a direct adaptation of the film, I wouldn't really see this as that much of an issue, but I don't remember when Akira Kurosawa made Toshiro Mifune fight werewolves, mechs, and steroid-guzzling freak beasts. Like a lot of the Japanese games from this era with an English dub, the audio mixing is rather poor, and this predates the subtitles being a basic mandatory setting, so there are plenty of points in the game where it is really hard to hear and understand what characters are saying.
Good eye. I'm looking for a guy named Roji.
The cast itself features a lot of the popular voice actors you'd expect to hear from anime in the early 2000s, like Liam O'Brien and Crispin Freeman.
At last, with your mask stripped away, you have seen the truth.
The dub is pretty hit or miss. As I've already talked about, there are goofy weirdos that just either take you out of the moment or are going to make you laugh and like the game more. But I would describe the dialogue and story of this game in the same way that Cvit did in his Chasm the Rift video. It's filled with skinwalker sentences, stuff that sounds like an approximation of dialogue written by a real human, but there's just something really off about it, like it was created by aliens who have a limited understanding of how humans speak.
I haven't turned against you, Nato. You've been betrayed. You'll find out. Soon.
The optional bosses aren't the only weirdos found in this game. The main antagonists host a whole stable of freaks. You got Dracula if he was modeled after the creepy spider from Miss Spider's Sunny Patch Kids as he was walking right off the set of Hotel Transylvania. There is this evil Shaolin master who injects himself with the coveted dirty bulk and turns himself into a Deathclaw while screaming that he's coming. The final boss drags you into the Digimon Rumble Arena dimension as he throws his scarfs at you. Alternatively, the arena does remind me of the time travel sequences from Daikatana, or that data bridge area with Axel in Kingdom Hearts 2. The story itself is interesting. I liked the characters. Your cast, even when weirdly acted at times, are super charming, but nearly every time the story is getting interesting and pulling you in, the Skinwalker-isms show up. I don't know how to describe it other than there are simply things missing. Parts of the game that were either cut for time or budget. I'm leaning more towards that rather than claiming it was due to ineptitude, but some of the moments in the story feel as if they were edited like a shitpost. Roji's goth GF gets injected by Dracula's Green Goblin serum and also turns into a Deathclaw, giving you this sad moment where he has to come to grips with the fact that he has to kill his lover, who is now turned into a monster, otherwise she will destroy the city. You would think that you're now going to see Roji fight her, or maybe you would even play as him in a scripted event. Nope. It fades to black as he runs at her, and then it fades back into him sitting on the steps crying with her dead off screen.
There are so many things I wish I could have told her. Yeah.
Nothing ever gets time to sit and have any emotional impact because it's either cut short, quickly moved on from, comes in out of nowhere as if it was already established and you should be knowing what's going on, or as we just showed, outright missing segments. One of your longest running companions dies saving a villager from a falling rock because the dude's wife was turned into an oozing wall monster right out of Full Metal Alchemist, and it's moved on from in like a minute. The game just doesn't have time for its own story, and it's a shame. Once you beat the game, you unlock Survival Mode, which is a no item, no saves, permadeath playthrough of the game. I honestly can't imagine this actually being that enjoyable to try and speed run through in one sitting. The game itself isn't that long, it took me just shy of 8 hours to beat, but as always, my playtimes may differ from the average person. You have to give or take some time since I'm constantly stopping to write notes for the video, and I'm going over lots of areas in these games with a fine-toothed comb so I don't miss things since I'm trying not to play with a guide unless absolutely necessary. The shallow gameplay, few really annoying segments, and the poor performance do not make this game mode enticing at all. The other notable thing that happens when you beat the game is that you can equip swords or weapons that you collected from all the bosses you fought throughout the game. You even get the ability to use Kai Kisuke and Soul Bad Guy's swords. I don't know why you would lock this feature behind beating the game once. It had me disappointed for most of my playthrough that I would see all of these cool weapons in the menu, but there was nothing to do with them. Sure, I can understand having some special unlocks for beating the game or or doing some optional content or getting a certain rating behind beating the game once, like Kaikisuke and Soul Bad Guy's weapons are, but these swords are all purely cosmetic. They don't change the gameplay of the game at all, at least from all the ones that I unlocked and tried. What is the harm in allowing the player to equip the weapons of optional bosses during the first playthrough? In my opinion, that only incentivizes you to seek them out more, which these optional bosses gameplay certainly isn't going to. It is really funny to see some of the massive swords used by larger characters and how they barely fit into the screen when attached to you, as they have to function like the normal katanas you use up until now, since it is purely a model swap. I think there is something really cool here with 7 Samurai 20XX. It has such an interesting blend of styles. It reminds me of so many things I loved seeing growing up that also came out around that time. It may not stand out mechanically, but just like Space Sheriff Spirits, it certainly does as a full package, being carried by its world and presentation, even if it's lacking in kinda jank and rough around the edges in areas. Like I said about the previously covered Sword of Destiny, this is a play if you want to check it out type game. If you aren't vibing with this game or simply don't have the time or the resources to play it, it's not the end of the world if you miss out on it or choose to skip it. I give this a firm okay rating, which is perfectly fine. Not everything can be the pinnacle of the genre, revolutionary, instant, underrated classic that is obscure and is a must play, or completely detestable bottom of the barrel. The list of games for this series at the time of recording this is at, I believe, 138, so there's no way that there aren't going to be some firm okay 6 out of 10s. If you've made it this far into the video, I just want to say thank you for watching as always. If you really like the video, then maybe leave a like and comment and pass the video around. If you want to support the channel and see more videos like this, maybe consider becoming a patron on Patreon. All patrons get access to videos a day early, along with a $3 tier that allows you to vote for upcoming multi-game reviews, a $7 tier that allows you to view rough cuts of upcoming videos, and I am now going to shout out all of my $5 and up patrons who really help support the channel: Applejuice426, Bilaz Boros, Barely, Bully, Densha, Fishkami, Friday Fragmaster, Jordan Bennett, Kevin Velasquez, Kohai Carmen, Metal Cactus, Medi Not the Bad Guy, MGS Duh, Quartz, Samuel Egan, Saiyan Heggy, Scary Dinosaurs, Speedo Weedo Wagon, Ben Johnson, Brendan Schwartz, Buckets, Chichometrius, Cursed Void, Ekphraso, Elliot Morton, Filthy Finger 69, Hardleg Joe, Lazy Titan, Leon, Lotto, Mitchell, Neutral Guy, Nicholas Pedinato, Sean, Shisaji, Sir Newt Newt, Slemp Tingle, and Turbo Chicken. Thanks so much, guys. If you're a card game player of any kind, I have a TCG Player affiliate link in the description below. Any purchases you make while using my link will give me a small kickback. I also have a NordVPN affiliate link in the description below, getting you a discount on a 2-year plan. As for what's coming out next, I do have a couple more PlayStation 2 action game videos, along with multi-game reviews on Jak and Daxter, Metroid Prime. I want to finish the Yakuza 3 retrospective sometime in the couple months. Maybe I'll get back to the Drakengard retrospective and finally finish that, even though it's mostly done, but I quit it just because it was causing me too much stress. That's pretty much it for now. As always, thanks for watching. I hope you like my next videos, and see you next time.